Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We're down here in Miami Beach, soaking up the sun, or at least the rays and the light coming in. You might get your sunburn from that light over there. TV camera lights all over the place. And these guys, they work a little bit more in the shadows. They are amongst our favorite guests, Football Outsiders. My dear friend Aaron Schatz, also joined by Frank Frigo of EDJ Sports. And this is the point in the program where he nerds it up, right? Like this is,
I guess so.
This is your
I think it's Edge Sports, right?
Sports. Edge Sports.
I just wanted to, I saw the look. I just wanted to make sure.
It says EDJ.
Spelled EDJ.
Well, and Edge Sports, a very, very big fan of John Harbaugh.
I didn't know it was pronounced Edge. There we go. I learned things. See that?
We're just educating you.
Okay.
See, when you and I talk and I start nerding it up, you got to
now
listen.
you'll know what Edge Sports is.
Well, I'll never forget educating us.
There you go.
There it is. You guys, you know, all the guys that nerd up the stats talk about the Ravens and the Ravens and the Ravens and 14-2, and then a game happens that forces this here on the Radio Row. And I guess trying to explain it for handicappers, prognosticators, fans, football matchup people, the outliers, right? Like that, these things happen in January, right?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that upsets do happen. It's interesting. The Baltimore was like the number 5 or 6 best team in our DVOA ratings in the regular season in the last 35 years. But they were the 3rd of those best teams to lose in the divisional round. So did the 2010 Patriots and the 87 49ers. So it happens. What's frustrating for us is, we've been preaching the gospel of going for it on 4th down, and finally with John Harbaugh, we have a head coach who went for it on 4th down, almost as much as the analytics say you should. And then in the biggest game of the season, they fail on 4th and 1 twice, which is, unfortunately, it's a situation where they made the right decision, but they're high variance decisions, and when you fail, it's bad.
Well, it acts as a turnover at that point in the game, and then you actually turn the ball over, which we all know is poison at home,
right,
at anywhere.
I mean, the goal of going for it on 4th and 1, is to not turn the ball over. It's that it's your likelihood of keeping the ball by converting is so strong on 4th and 1, and the importance of keeping the ball is so strong with how powerful offenses are in this day and age that you've got to go for it. The problem is, if there's a 70% conversion rate, that means that 30% of the time you are going to be turning the ball over.
Well, you got to go for it, but then you got to make it.
Yeah.
Especially on 4th and 1.
It's the equivalent of being at the blackjack table. When you might be a great blackjack player, you're going to bust sometimes. I mean, that's just the nature of it.
And unfortunately, it happened for them twice in the same game that happened to be a playoff game where if you lose, you're out.
Week to week, and you guys putting this together and watching what the Ravens did 12 weeks in a row, winning with this sort of 45-6 on the road, and against decent teams. As an outlier, when you say top 5 team, and all the ways that you rate teams, when you get into the middle of all of that, comparing it to anything else, because we were trying to compare it to other things, but the offense is so much different than anything the game has seen, right? The way other teams have to attack it, the personnel they have to use, that it's left-handed for everybody. Maybe not as much moving forward with the Chiefs and Houston doing other variances.
Well, they still don't run the quarterback as much as Baltimore runs the quarterback. It's that Greg Roman offense, the same one that he ran in San Francisco with Colin Kaepernick, that by having the quarterback constantly be a run threat, you constantly create a situation where it's essentially 11 on 11 instead of 10 on 11, and it gives you a lot more leeway to run the ball. And also, you hide the ball by who's going to have it. Is it the running back? Is it the quarterback? The play action fakes are even more useful than usual because of the possibility of the quarterback not only is going to throw it, but is going to run the ball. So while there have been other teams that have been as strong as Baltimore was such a strong all-around team, all 3 phases of the game. But none of those teams in recent NFL history had gotten to that point by having such a run-heavy offense as what Baltimore did.
Aaron Schatz joining us here for Football Outsiders. And Frank Frigo from EDJ. I'm going to keep calling it EDJ.
Edge Sports.
It says EDJ on it.
Edge.
Look at it right there. I'm pronouncing it wrong. I know I am. How are you?
I'm doing great.
It's good to have you aboard. I'll make sure I get your mic level right as well. Yeah, in putting together, and I guess I met Aaron. I met you in Indianapolis. It feels like almost 2 decades ago. Jim Schwartz actually, introduced me to Aaron at one point a million years ago at a combine. How far all of this has gone from Luke is addicted to all of this, but more than that, where you got coaches and you've got people inside the industry paying attention to it and basing decisions on science, as you guys would say, right? I mean, if you'd only get the government to play along, as I'm 5 feet from the Atlantic Ocean here, but yes.
Yeah, so you mentioned Jim Schwartz. I mean, he was one of the early proponents of analytics. I mean, Aaron and I both spent time with him early on. But what we've seen now is, I mean, analytics has been a buzzword for a number of years, but what you're seeing now in the last couple of years is really a greater sort of embrace of actually taking those ideas and putting them into action. I mean, Baltimore was a very special case this year. They had such a high-powered offense, which in our analysis, in our modeling, puts them in situations at a much higher level where they need to be aggressive. So it's really extraordinary.
Keeping the ball is that important.
Keeping the ball is important. As Aaron said, I mean, some of these 4th and shorts, you're a 3-to-1 favorite to convert those. And yes, when it doesn't happen, it's high variance. It looks really bad. But we look at it as decisions that give you the highest percentage of winning, and they were extraordinarily good at it. I mean,
well, it's so different than blackjack or poker if you think about it in those terms, to say, I'm dealt this hand, this is how to play it, this is how to bet it, and then somebody draws pocket aces and you go home or whatever, right?
We love the game analogies because quite a few of us at Edge and Football Outsiders are pretty serious games players, and we've seen the revolutions in how machines have just become better than humans at most skill-based games. And a lot of those ideas have translated into the football realm.
And baseball realm.
Absolutely.
Well, Sig Mejdal is in Baltimore. I mean, who knows what stuff they were doing in Houston with baseball. I'll be there to ask those questions in the future, trust me. I don't like cheaters. But the notion that baseball's gone that way, well,
yeah, I mean,
maybe a little past that way at this point, but that is the way everyone should be evaluating this, particularly if they're gambling their money on it, I would think, right?
Yeah, I mean, the goal in any decision making is to look at the best available information that you have at the time of decision, not playing results. I mean, after the fact, it's easy to say, oh, that was a bad decision because it didn't work.
But because it was raining that day, and that changed everything about the decision, right?
Sure. Well, you have to factor in, what you know at the time you're making those decisions. I mean, if the example I always like to give is if it's the last play of the game and you're down 2 points, everybody knows. You don't need analytics to know that you're supposed to kick the field goal. That's the highest percentage chance to win the game on a last play. But if you went for the TD and you succeeded, you win the game, you high-five, but it doesn't mean it was a good decision. Right. It was a horrible decision.
Right.
And conversely, if you kick the field goal and the 2 or 3% of the time you might miss it, or 1 or 2%.
Well, we judge the outcomes. We're America.
Yeah,
you can try to cross the street in traffic, and you might not get killed, but that doesn't mean it was smart.
Exactly, yeah. So, so I think we've just really seen, a whole different level of adoption now, in football. I mean, you mentioned baseball. I mean, the sabermetricians were at it early on, and I think back on an early conversation I had with Paul DePodesta, who's now back in football.
Former Baltimore Bandits intern, Paul DePodesta, by the way.
Yeah, when he was the GM of the Dodgers, he was under great scrutiny about taking some of these ideas into the old school, and I remember talking to him and him saying that the thing about baseball is that we concluded after doing all of our analysis is that basically outs are bad. You're trying to generate runs in almost all situations and trying to keep your opponent from generating runs. But football's a lot more complex in a lot of ways from a scoring standpoint, because you have a decaying clock and you score in these different increments. And there's really, when you model it, there's a lot of counterintuitive ideas. And anyhow,
what's your background, by the way?
So my background is I was a professional backgammon player. I still play a bit, and we've seen the robots completely take over that game.
I played Scrabble.
Another great game, yeah. But basically, chess, Go, poker, backgammon have all been taken over. The machines are far better than the humans now. And also, I came from a commodity trading background as well.
Well, I mean, but sports. I mean, Aaron, I would even ask you. I mean, I know you as the football nerd, outsider dude, and all that. watch the Red Sox, right? You're a baseball guy, right? Like
was a baseball guy originally
yeah,
before I got into football.
like all of us, right? Like before my dad passed away in 1992, but my dad got the first Bill James baseball abstract back in the late 70s and early 80s, and my dad liked that part of baseball. It's a shame he died before all that stuff came online, but I think baseball for anyone has got a little bit of silver going on, and that even includes Luke a little bit going on there. I mean, we're baseball nerds. My last name's Aparicio, right? And it's interesting that you guys have been the forerunners at Edge of Football Outsiders and amongst others in having this, that for that 15, 20-year period between where nerdity in baseball came online in the 80s and then became adopted, right, after the steroid era, to where football is still like, oh, that John Harbaugh, that riverboat gambler, he's going on fourth down. I don't know. There's 32 teams. I don't know that anybody has employed these tactics the way Eric DaCosta, using the front line of Astro Ball or whatever the baseball premise is, that there are still people in football not using this but feeling behind, and you guys, you're shaking your head, you're furrowed brow, all that stuff, like the same as Sig Mejdal in the casino, where somebody came in and got dealt 17 and hit it, or stuck or didn't split aces, or any of the stuff that you're supposed to do, right? You guys have been doing this and tisking for a long time. There must be some gratification that at some point something's been adopted by someone, right? And it's John as much as anybody, right?
Yeah, I mean, there is some gratification because it's been a long grind. We've been preaching this for more than
on the interweb.
Yeah, more than a decade, and
I even know how to say your name now. It's Edge.
Correct.
That's how good it is.
Yes, Edge Sports. Yes. So it has been a long grind, and but it is gratifying to see that there are some changes now taking place. I mean, Aaron and I were talking about coaches going for it on fourth down back in like early 2000s. I think was the first time we talked about it.
In like 2005 or something.
It would have changed the history of the league here, But
back then we thought Bill Belichick was so forward because he went for it like 1.3, 1.4 times as much as the average coach. This year, John Harbaugh went for it on fourth down about 4 times as often as the average coach over the last 20 years.
Well, and then the one time Belichick didn't make it, right? He got completely barbecued,
and he's become conservative since then.
He has. That was interesting. I mean, even in the Ravens-Patriots game, twice they kicked field goals inside the 5, and they had their issues offensively. We know that, but I guess for me, because I read Football Outsiders, I've been checking out Edge Sports, I've enjoyed that. What still bugs you today? I mean, you talk about some of the advances that the Ravens, Doug Peterson and the Eagles have been better with this, but what's one of those things about game strategy that coaches still do pretty prevalently that really bugs you?
I think for me, it's the lack of understanding. There's a conventional wisdom of you're trying to score points. Like I was talking about with the baseball analogy. Producing runs is good. Keeping your opponent from producing runs is generally good in baseball. In football, the utility, the usefulness of points shifts dramatically because of the clock and the score. And I think coaches often have this conventional wisdom that, this has been a long drive. I got to get something out of it. And they're losing. The proper context is what's going to produce more wins, not just how do I get a field goal out of this situation.
Or feel good.
Yeah. And so I think while things have advanced, and we've in Baltimore took it to a whole other level this year, there are still a lot of situations on fourth and shorts in your own territory that are clearly correct goes. There's still a lot of red zone decisions where coaches are taking sort of quote-unquote guaranteed points and losing perspective on winning the game. That it's still kind of frustrating. And I think the other one, and it's less impactful in terms of the material effect on winning the game, but when I see the sort of throwing up the flag, a team down 17 points and they're punting the ball
because they don't want to lose by 24.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the defensive that looks good on a defensive coordinator's resume when they're going for a head coaching job down the line, but other than that, it makes 0 sense. So
I have heard some coaches talk about the idea that means something for locker room morale, which I guess I understand, but I mean, I would hope that the players would want to have the biggest chance to win the game.
Not just players to understand that's also difficult too, right?
I mean,
getting players in a post-game scrum after a game you lose to really understand the analytics of who thinks what, where the game's been played a certain way forever, right?
Right. Well, here's an example that I like to give about how analytics needs to sort of come face-to-face with player psychology, is that we know that in analytics the teams need to pass the ball more. It's a little strange to say that on a Baltimore radio station because the Ravens were so good running the ball.
Right.
But for the most part, almost every team in the league other than the Ravens this year was so much more efficient passing the ball than running the ball. Teams still run the ball too much. But one of the reasons they do is that for offensive linemen would much rather run the ball. They like to go out there and kick some butt.
They love it.
So you've got to figure out a way to give offensive linemen that same feeling of sort of dominance at the line while not running the ball as much. Because running the ball is bad, but offensive linemen feeling like they can kick some butt is good.
You going emotional intelligence on me here? You bringing that in?
Or how about run the ball on 3rd and short?
Well, that's the other problem.
When teams don't do that as much as they should,
the other problem is
which is counterintuitive.
Teams run too much when they should pass, and they pass too much when they should run.
Aaron Schatz here, Football Outsiders and Edge Sports. Frank Frigo's here, also co-founder. You guys can check that out. Luke lives and dies on all of this stuff and references all the time the culture of what you do and who your audience is, that analytics on baseball still hasn't sucked in the old nerd in me. Now, I know the lack of value of RBIs and wins and WAR, and I'm a little over-nerded by it on the baseball side. On the football side, I'm more interested in how it's gotten involved in the strategy of going forward on 4th down and the conversations we'd have. But trying to always recruit some old white guy like me to say, this is the new way we look at things here. I think baseball's failed in that in a lot of ways to bring people over. Even when Buck Showalter was managing the team, there's infighting about the value of all of this. I think it's for you guys to find a larger audience. The appeal of this is what to someone that this is new and say, now why is Harbaugh going on 4th down? It shows nerd sites out there. What's the entry?
Well, you're a smarter fan. You're a smarter gambler if you're into that kind of thing.
Fair enough.
You're a smarter fantasy football player if you're into that kind of thing. I mean, it's just, in a way, I'm sort of, as a writer who writes a site about analytics, I'm sort of still in the entertainment business. I started out in the entertainment business. I was a radio disc jockey. I'm still in the entertainment business. It's just the way that I entertain people is by making them smarter football fans so that when they're watching football with their friends, they feel like they're smarter about it. But it's not about learning abbreviations. It's about learning ideas. You don't need to learn that my stat is called DVOA and what does that stand for. What you need to learn is the basic idea behind it, which is that yards matter differently depending on what the yards to go is, that passing is more efficient than running, that keeping the ball is the most important thing, that you don't want to turn the ball over to the other team, and that actually means going forward is better because even though you can fail and turn the ball over on downs, you're more likely to keep it, whereas every punt is a turnover. So it's learning the basic ideas that's important, not just, not WAR or RBI or whatever, just abbreviations. But I want people to be comfortable with the basic ideas, and most importantly, I want teams to be comfortable with the basic ideas of what analytics teaches. And also, once every team is doing analytics, then there'll be new analytics that find new ways to win and find new discrepancies. And it's more about a way of thinking where you want to think about things differently and think about things using evidence, not just your gut.
Well, and the gateway to this would be, hey, what's he doing? When a fan says, why does it work, the why is the gateway, right? And the why is all answered in lately science and numbers and long, as you pointed out, computers that are smarter than even Vince Lombardi was.
Imagine that.
I mean, the computer can't replace Vince Lombardi. Listen, there's lots of things that coaches do that math will never take over for, like, giving incentive to players and, cheering them on and knowing when to yell at them and knowing when to cheer them and knowing play calling and
who's less than 100% at their position, right?
There's lots of ways in which the gut works, but there's lots of times in which the numbers show that the difference between making one decision and making the other decision is so large that no amount of your gut can overwhelm the math.
Loved having you guys on, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Thanks for educating me. EDJ and Edge Sports. And
Thank
football.
you. Edge
Sports.
There you go.
I'm sorry.
And Football Outsiders.
And Football Outsiders.
Great sites.
Thanks,
There's
guys.
your spokesperson for
I
Baltimore
go
right here.
virtually at least several times a week, if not every day.
And references it every time we talk.
Awesome.
So there you go.
DVOA has been talked about in our conversation. Win probability has been talked about in our conversations more and more. Whether people like it, listening to it or not, they're going to hear it from me.
We try to be smart around here. That's why I keep Luke here.
Baltimore's our flagship team at this point. They're waving the flag for the movement, so we have to admit we're all kind of rooting for them.
And what do we call that movement, Baltimore? Revolution.
The offensive revolution. That's right. John Harbaugh said it last year. Ended up being pretty smart.
I feel like Che Guevara, but I look like Nestor Aparicio. The BuyAToyota.com Audio Vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device. We're down here in Miami. We are sunning ourselves and talking to cool people about cool stuff. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 and WNST Towson, Baltimore. We never stop talking Baltimore sports.